the real events of the past, as well as modern time information. What affects us today and what has affected us yesterday that is affecting us today, if you see what I'm saying. So right now, we are moving into an area of time, not only within the standard 12 signs of the zodiac, but the sidereal clock as well. All right? And we are in the process of making big and major changes on the planet. And Brother Taj is going to be providing details referencing that. With that said, I'd like to bring Brother Taj to the bay to have him deliver a wonderful message. Please receive the brother well and give him a round of applause.
Can you all hear me? I'm good? Yeah. 1, 2, 3, testing. All right. Now, when Brother Ali was talking, actually, for the last couple of weeks he called. And Ali, subject matter for tonight, mainly he was talking about current affairs. Go down the list, so keep me on point. And some of the other things that we want to talk about, inclusive in it is hypothecation. All right? Because you need to know what you're dealing with. Part of what I want to bring up as we were talking here is that I understand that it's difficult for a lot of people in many levels. However, the reality is we're at a serious turning point on this planet for humanity, going beyond what you think is the normal politics. Although some of the dog and pony show that you see going on around the world with the Knights Templar known as Donald Trump, don't underestimate his position. In many ways, he's being forced to tell a lot of certain truths, but because things have been out of order so long, many people think he's out to lunch. And he's absolutely not. The people are out to lunch for the most part. And a lot of things he says may appear like off level to a lot of people, but a lot of things he's doing is actually what you call priming the pump for actually a lot of the traitors and a lot of the dragons of the ghouls of the clan operations of the Organic Act of 71, pulling them out of the woodworks. Are we clear? Yeah. And it's not defending him personally, it's really knowing what the politics are. And knowing that the masses don't know the politics. So the masses are pretty much under mind control. However, the sideline plan to eliminate most of these people physically after robbing their estates is being accelerated. And by people not really knowing the politics, they're looking at other things. They're being diverted to other arguments when this is more serious than they think it is. And be honest with you, if it were not for some of your old family Manchurians, and we're not talking about all of them, and then some of them are fictitious, that actually some of the Roman families are hiding behind under the guise of Manchurian, not really Manchurian. If it wasn't for them, a lot more people would be dead in North America. Now, of course, the people here have an idea of what they think they're about and have ideas of what they think they know, when they really don't. So some of our conversation is simply to share with you and to maybe inspire you to think a little bit, to see beyond what's going to be thrown in front of you constantly, because you have what old guard and new guard battling it out. In fact, what we've been telling you for the last 7 or 8 years, it is just coming closer to the surface. In North America, there's a civil war going on. The Civil War never ended, in truth, but it's coming to the surface again. Unfortunately, the people who will be the easiest targets for elimination will be those who do not know what's going on and who are not doing certain things in their lives and with their family's life to preserve their estates so they don't be on the curb, which makes them easier to be eliminated. And who, out of not knowing what's up, go into the pathological cities that they're doing in all your major cities with any of your common so-called diseases, which they will also use to eliminate them. And those who are unwise enough to take their children to them and let them stick a needle in them under the guise of vaccine. And those who don't change their diet. They'll be eliminated anyway. So they'll be out of the way. Knowing that most people don't take any of that serious, knowing that a lot of them got to be eliminated before they really start paying attention. Because they're mentally, they believe in the system, even though they know it has always harmed them. All the history is it's always harmed them. Their belief is it's their system. It's unum sanctum. And so some of the things we're talking about is current state of affairs. As we were talking in the car, hypothesizing that people appear not to really understand that operation. And it is the current state of things. The battles that people are in a sense, you're not going to beat Rome in the sense of beating Rome, because Rome is a death machine. Rome operates on the absolute cathode principle of the negative energy of the earth, or what you call Satanism. You call it that. However, Satan is not necessarily what you think it is either. Satan is really the planet Saturn. So let's get that out of the way. The devil game is and has been a tool of the priesthood. The devil, in the concept that the masses get it, doesn't exist, never did. The Satan or the devil principle is the priesthood itself. They stand behind like a thing there, and it's a whole pit. That's the demon. And that's how they work. That's one of the reasons why this thing has not been overturned. Because the very people they think is divine is really the demon. And so they have a stronghold on the planet. And the people who have been injured by them will be the first to defend them. Even while these people have been eating their babies for centuries and they don't even know it. Do you understand? So when they do that ritual with the blood and crackers, that's only symbolized what they do for real. The body of Christ and the wine is the blood. They really do that. That's just because one of the things that the dark priesthood do from a divine law principle of understanding Hermetic law, because in divine law, it does not recognize person or station. So this is one of some people who look at things from a sociological and metaphysical perspective will say, well, why do they tell you what they're going to do to you? They do that to relieve or to minimize the karmic response of nature. So what they'll do, they'll tell you what they're going to do to you, but they'll tell it to you in a manner that they're actually telling you that's to remove the karmic debt or to minimize it, and then deceive you into walking into the trap. And then they're like vultures, then they seize upon your estate. And this is how things operate. That's how they operate. It's not opinion, that's how they operate. Now, in order to also relieve the karmic debt, the brand system, as we were talking, and also to get you, just like when you see here, you know, like in the Septuaginta, when you see that in the altered book, they'll say Job, long O, short O, Job, Job, they're totally related. You understand? That's where that really comes from. So their job, the priesthood, and this is across the board, so don't get this twisted when you're thinking, oh, well, if he's Buddhist, and if he's Muslim, and, you know, and he's Christian, although it comes from the church, all of them come under it. All of them have been contaminated, are we clear? It's just that Constantinianism, under the guise of Christianity, is the headstone of this whole game. Are we clear? So people think that because they go into different versions of what they think is religion, that they've escaped Rome. Oh yeah. You know, so it's really difficult, and I understand it, and I don't condemn people. I'm just going to put the facts out there. You do what you choose to do. But upon examination, I always say, you need not challenge me. It's not necessary. Prove me wrong. And in doing so, you will learn. I'll not try to convince you of anything. I'll just give you reference points. You go ahead and do what you want to do. Whosoever hears, let them hear. Whoever wants to know, you can know. You don't want to know, block, Rome school won't get you. Don't matter. Because the state's already hypothecated. My interest is this. We cannot stop the bloodshed. What we can do is limit it. We can't stop the karmic debt that's already in motion. What we can do is put some brakes on it, but it has to come from the people themselves. In other words, the people themselves have to have the will to reject Rome. They choose not to, or they choose to take a passive position, they're free. That's just it, cut and dry. Let's not even play around with it. I wouldn't call it a problem. I would just say the reality of this time is, the cycle of this time, is that we don't have the options that we did in the Piscean energy to play belief games and get away with it and pass on to the next generation. They're going to answer all metaphysical checks that you write, you're going to cash them. You ain't getting to another cycle. You're not taking this stuff to another cycle, so you can just chalk that up. And I know that people in their subconscious mind, regardless of their belief systems, have a certain sense of security in their divine mind, thinking they can continue to do what they was doing and just pass it to the next time. No, it's not gonna happen. In the Aquarian energy with Uranus and Saturn ruling at the same time, all impurities will be eliminated from this planet. You ain't taking this into the next dimension. And dimension is not a place, it is a vibrational state. You know, so the earth is actually, we're going through the futon belt anyway. You know, so there's a purification, not a belief system. There's a natural purification cycle that the planet goes through. Now, people who really understand this planet know that that cycle is roughly around 3,600 years. And to spook people up, you'll see people don't, Nabu was coming past the planet X and all, no, which is the cycle, the earth cycles. She cleanses herself. You know, now, even though we know that the Bible is used for mind control systems, it can also be used to counter the priesthood. Are we clear? So my references to the Bible is not in support of the modification of the anthropomorphic resentment by the dark priesthood, is actually as a countermeasure to the venom of their snake. I'm giving them their stuff back. Meaning that you can, when you understand the books, you can actually use it to counter them. Do you understand? Or if you don't understand the books, you will fall subject to it and it will poison you. Do you understand? So a lot of times, you know, when I'm making reference, don't think because I'm pushing that book, because I'm not. I'm just simply using it to counter the dark priesthood. because they altered that from the Book of the Dead in order to control humanity. You know, so it's really understanding how to use it as a countermeasure. However, you're also getting back to the very important state of mind that is embodied in the word sincerity. That's very key, very key. And it's also important for us not to fall into the psychological divisionism that they keep promoting amongst different nations and amongst people. But it's also important to know who's who. Are we clear? It's important to understand from a political perspective why it was already done, but why the German Dutchman, Dwight D. Eisenhower in '54, officially suppressed the Court of Diversity of Article 3. Because around 1954, you have what you call a closing of cycle, whereas the power of the Germanic tribes to enforce the unum sanctum policy on the planet from a metaphysical, divine perspective is waning. So keep in mind the things that the Praetors do in their ens legis operations are always based on an ephemeris operation of how things work, not what the masses believe. Are we clear? So whenever any major legislation is done, particularly coming from North America, understand it is done with a cadre of Sayarahas and astrologers who will look at all of the charts. You'll deal with national charts, geographical charts, and when they're attacking single units, they'll already have a chart on you. You understand? And they will always deal with that mathematics in everything that they do. I'm telling you this so that you can, in your own intelligence, start saving yourself from a lot of their psychic attacks, just by knowing what I just told you. What you do with that, it's on you. You can do what you choose to do. But that's a key, you know, and because Rome is so entrenched on the planet, there's no such thing as going up and punching Goliath in the nose, because he'll just simply crush it. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? However, what he has not taken is all of your mind. If you fail to use what's left, don't worry your food. It's done, no need, don't waste your time. If you're not willing to start using your intelligence, you can be considered fired. Not opinion, it's just simply fact. Now, also, they're keeping humanity off guard by keeping you under economic warfare attack, under hypothecation. So as the people start waking up to certain needs, economic needs and securities, they're going to be doing things in the name of economies when they don't know what economy is. You understand? So if we can get you to do certain things, we know that we can start putting brakes on the dark priesthood. You can call them Satan if you want to, but it's not necessarily the negative that you think it is, if you get the point. And Lucifer is not necessarily negative. Lucifer just something means he who bears the light. The great difficulty for humanity, as you look at this right now, really, is that they've been twisted into this whole God business game to a degree that they don't know left from right. And actually, that's where all the demons are. And I know it's difficult for people to handle that, but that's the truth. And if they're not able to overcome it, they're done. That's why there's going to be very few. It is probably easier to save a child than it is most adults, because children aren't contaminated with the belief systems that they have falsely charged Jesus, God, Buddha, Muhammad, Allah, Yahweh with, that has nothing to do with any of that stuff. Really, and really true. But yet it's been attached under those passwords, which is why most of humanity is done. Now that's the real truth. And only because they won't let it go. They won't render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, because they don't know what is Caesar's and what's not Caesar's. And when you say Caesar, we mean Roman ruler. We're talking about, write this down, the Roman Curia collectively. The Rome, change the position if it's not coming through. The Roman Curia collectively. That's what we're talking about. So when you look into the Bible, when it talks about render unto Caesar what is Caesar, you need to know that you're talking about unum sanctum operations of Rome on the planet Earth. Are we clear? That's collectively. The bishopric order of the clergy, period.
Roman Curia collector.
Collectively. Now, this is what must be understood. So that you can get this out, get this in your head. And I won't name names because it has not to be personal. But as an example, if you're talking about Zuckerberg, Facebook, and stuff like that, you're talking about a member of the Roman Curia. If you're talking about Bill Gates, you're talking about Roman Curia. If you're talking about any of the Congress people who are really private oligarchs, calling themselves congressmen and senators, you're talking Roman Curia. If you're talking any, and I say any, A-N-Y, bar none, any CEOs of any corporate entity at all in any of the Western countries, including England, Great Britain, the United States Corporation, which is not the country, but which is the operational order of the Roman Curia operating at North America under the guise of a country, which is really the Jesuit order army line, to enforce unum sanctum policy. You're dealing with members of the Roman Curia. Whether you're dealing with any of the Masonic orders of Freemason, we're not talking about the nature of Masonry itself. Masonry itself is Islam, science, not religion in the concept that people take it. Are we clear? Are we clear? Because that's really just the preservation of the history of humanity on the planet and all of the disciplines that have been preserved for rulership and maintenance of the planet. Are we clear? That's what Masonry is. And Masonry simply means mother and son. That's all that means. Are we clear? So in nature, every man's a Mason. Are we clear? But politically, in the club system, every man is not a club Mason. Are we clear? Now, club Masonry is designed politically to specifically create a caste system. Are we clear? And for it to be maintained. Are we clear? Are we clear? So like say for instance, you become a big time minister. We go here. Say for instance, you become a big time minister. I don't care what denomination it is. And I don't care what you say publicly. Secretly, you will be a Mason. If you got a big business and you're not eliminated economically or otherwise, it's because you're a Mason. You'll be pulled in one way or another. You're a woman, you'll be an Eastern Star, daughter of American Revolution, daughter of ISIS, either one, because you will not run anything on this planet and not belong to a secret society. Do you understand? Don't mean that you won't do things, but you ain't going nowhere with nothing in the way of real controlling people in economics, and they'll just say loosely if you're not a Mason. That's what runs the planet. Are we clear? Now, don't confuse Masonry, the science and history of humanity, with the Masonic orders and the negative use or misuse of that information. Are we clear? Meaning that this cup of water quenches thirst. You can also drown in it. Sun shines on the good as well as the evil. Same thing. Are we clear? So understand that. And the reason why you see a lot of mystery and conjecture around Masonry is to keep you from looking at it. Because then you would start figuring out how things run, and immediately you probably go down to the corner and get that man out of the corner that you thought was the house of God and find out he's a spy for the community. And he might be hanging from the nearest light pole because he works for the Pope. And you think because he's Baptist or Methodist and stuff that he's different, that's your idea, not who he is. Those are spy centers. However, under the Roman Curia, it's just a fact, get over yourself. And the beliefs have nothing to do with it, all right? Now, redundantly, Trinity operations of the dark priesthood. The masses are not allowed to handle money. Are we clear? They get private commercial paper that's classified as fiat, but it's important to call it what it is, private commercial paper, coming under the classification of fiat. People will often call it fiat, but that's a classification, all right? That's not what it is. Are we clear? It is private commercial paper. Those are debt notes controlled by the Jesuit order under unum sanctum operations of hypothecation of all humanities estates. Are we clear? All administrations under that, under the bench of the Pope, which is also called the bank, is to support that system. Are we clear? You're brought into secret society to keep you clear on what is and what is not. This is why everybody who knows, or what doesn't matter whether they're dealing positively or negatively, because remember, the truth is one. That's why they always carry the coin. Are we clear? Silver coin, to remind you of what's up. Also in private conversations so that people don't assume you to be who you're not. Are we clear? Whether you're on the positive side or the negative side, you're going to carry a coin in your pocket. Are we clear? So I'm just advising you. Also, if you're in a situation, Rayan, if you're in a situation like in the trading venue, it's not a court, it's a trading venue. And there's a challenge, you bring out your silver coin and say, whatever claim they made, here's my claim. Stop the court. Because remember that magistrate who's a private administrative clerk is a member of the Roman Curia. He's still obligated to that Constitution even though he's breaching. You understand? But that's a consciousness. You know, and they'll usually close the court down because now you're teaching the people, and they don't want them slaves to wait in the yard and smash them in the head with a hatchet, which they should have done a long time ago, like Jefferson said. But Jefferson warned them if they didn't do this to these people, that this is what was going to happen to them. but they didn't listen to him. And this is why you got the democracy order of the demons that has overturned the republic. That's what the Organic Act of 71 is. And they set up a feudal order of operations, so the masses of the living beings have never lived under the republic. They've heard of it, they don't even know what it is. It's just a word to them. You know what I mean? It's just a word.
Islam Taj, question for you, sir. Referencing what's happening politically today, you know, you have the Jeffrey Epstein of the world, what's going on with Trump and Acosta, who's the more, I believe. How is what's going on today, how should we look at it as an example?
As the dog and pony show diversion for the, you can look at it as on a metaphysical level. You can look at it as the Aquarian lights coming in and moving out the dirt and the shadows of the Piscean order. On the physical level, in a more aggregate form, you can look at the overturning of the bishopric operations of the Unum Sanctum that's been in operation under the Spanish Inquisition for these last few hundred years. And then you can look at them resisting and them recognizing that their platform is being dismantled. You can look at them recognizing already the state of affairs of general humanity that is still sleeping and groggy. You can look at them trying to control their outpost overseers. Many of them who are called Negro ministers, who appear to be loving Jesus type thing. Their job is to keep the masses passive while they get raped. They're slowly being exposed. But the people don't know they're arm of the Pope. Now, when you're talking about Jeffrey Epstein, you're really talking about probably, as an example, 2/3 of the entire oligarchy that people call Congress. Maybe more.
Remember,
You're talking about 90% of all your priests across the land. You're talking about almost every, and it is probably none that are not contaminated, CEO of every corporate entity in England, Germany, and North America. That's for starters. In other words, you're talking about 90% of these people that you call government. Jeffrey Epstein is tip of ice cube of the iceberg. Right now I see him as I haven't looked into it, but understanding the politics, he's a sacrificial lamb to divert what's going on in the background, because what's happening, you already know what's happening with the T-bond thing. 90% of all the world's trading windows are frozen. They're getting ready to freeze up all credit operations, and the Jesuit order operations under the Unum Sanctum operations of the military arm at North America depends on the bond system and for nations to buy them. So they're going to be doing everything they can to start wars. If it was happy to clown, that's what they're there for.
but Trump, I noticed that they were, Bolton and Pompeo, they were trying to get Trump to go to war with Iran. And
More than likely, you know them ships that they got bombed in the Gulf? More than likely they did it. More than likely they did it. And then blamed Iran, because Iran is one of the few nation states that does not, that the Jesuits are not directly controlling. Let me see. Iran and part of Manchuria, not all. Manchuria, Tiani, or that you call China. Maybe one more, but all the rest of them are controlled by the Jesuits. And as you already know, that most of these political jurisdictions that they call nation states are simply puppets of the Jesuit. I don't care what nation you call it. Which is why all of them are corporate and run from Fleet Street, England. The judicial system at North America is run by the Circle Church operatives on Fleet Street, England, under the barristers and attorneys who call themselves attorneys in breach and in violation of original Article of Amendment 13 for the United States Constitution in order to subvert all treaties, and this is the politics that you're actually dealing with. So you need to be aware of that when you're challenging jurisdiction. That has to be in the canvas of your mind, because the administrative clerks who have been impersonating themselves as judges, they're not judges. Know that the average person don't know that they're not judges. And they'll accept in trust law when you call them judge, at that moment you just authorize them under trust law. This is again why we got to change our language. You know, so again, I'm rambling into certain different areas because we're dealing with the different problems that our people are dealing with every day. Now, Donald Trump, which you already know is a Knights Templar. You know the history between the Pope of Rome and the Templars. Now, Donald Trump is really a witness against Epstein. You know, with that first thing that they covered up. You know that, right? Now, even though it's not defending him, it's just talking to politics, they're still arguing over our estate. One. Then you have the Ku Klux Klan Party, which is the Democratic Party, who will and forever counter him. I don't care. 90% of the stuff that they're talking about Trump is false. I'm not defending Trump. That's because he didn't come through the circle. But then you have to also understand that Trump also has limited choice. So what he's trying to do, and it's not really him, he's a front. He was put in that position. Because what you're really dealing with is maybe percentage-wise half of the military operations. And keep in mind, all of your admirals, generals, and people like that are all Masons. They're either Templars, Masons, Shriners, past 33, and that, all of them. There's none that are not, are we clear? Whether you're talking about a Knight of Columbus, all of your praetors, or people that you call presidents, every last one of them are Knights of Malta, even if they belong to another order. So they're battling on another level that's not necessarily conscious to the public. Are we clear? So what the public sees is a dog and pony show. Now, what you see with the 13 European families who have been pretty much running the planet is them battling with each other for the outcome of the new order. Now, it's either the new old order of Unum Sanctum continued in another name, or it is the Aquarian order that eliminates them, which is what you're dealing with now. So from their perspective, they want to get rid of Trump at all costs. Do you understand? Now Trump, if he wants to save, he may appear to, but really it's already done. The Jesuits have already hollowed out North America. It's already been hollowed out under the Unum Sanctum operations. Now, what he can do is set a groundwork to bring some semblance back, or to force some of the Roman Curia members to bring some of their businesses back to North America, which is really what he's trying to do. Or they lose everything. And even if he's successful, it's going to take another 10 to 15 years to rehydrate the base economy. Meanwhile, the European families are trying to get these people into a digital form so they can rob them better and easier. What's what it really is. In other words, the only salvation is non-fiat operations. And they're going to do everything to dance around that, to talk about digital this, digital that, currency. They must understand that currency is not money.
And as of May, I forget the specific date within that month, but there's something called Basel III.
Yeah, the
All
Basel.
central banks had to be Basel III compliant, which is gold back.
I know it, you know it. Masses don't know it.
Right.
The other deal is, all right, remember we said about 3 years ago, watch Deutsche Bank?
They just made some major changes today.
They're firing about 18,000 people for starters, right? Now, keep in mind, Deutsche Bank is actually the pit stop for the other banks that are operating under the unum sanctum at North America to dump their stuff. Now, the problem that they're having is that the European nations ain't letting them get that bailout out this time. The people here, they're still dumb. They're pretty much, they're like children. In both lack of information and denial, not that they don't know. And they think America's a country. And that platform is dead. It's over. Problem that you have is that the heirs of the estate are behind. And so you have that gray area that's operative right now. So this dog and pony show, they're buying time. Trump is making trade agreements that are outside of the pre-existing venues. He's dismantling them to try to bring some lifeblood back into the operations here. And he's doing it. He's doing it. It's just that this thing is so vast and so dead that it's, it's just that like that. Now, 90% to be conservative of all these oligarchs who these people think are congressmen and senators, who are really a private oligarchy, are part of that network, including all the people that they think is judges, which is also why Epstein got off first time, which is also why all the crap that a lot of these other politicians have done and have been doing, including stealing organs, the food bank with the children carcasses after they kill them and steal their organs, that people have been buying, 2 for $5 burgers, not knowing that they're eating their children. All of this stuff. This is just the tip of the iceberg starting to come out. See, and all of this opposition to Trump by Pelosi and all of them is not what you think. It's really all of this stuff. Now, this Epstein thing is walking a paradigm that's going to unfold card after card after card while they're trying to get rid of him at the same time. Are we clear? But this thing is so entrenched, so ugly, so beastly, so demonic that the average person won't be able to handle it. they will be mad at Trump when actually he's purging. They look at him as the enemy, and he's actually purging. You know, but these people are part of the character of the masses. It is the evil that's in the hearts of the masses that let this stuff develop in the first place. It's a reflection of them in reality. You know, that's what that's about.
From a political standpoint, related to we the Moors on northwest of Memphis and southwest of Memphis, the 1913 Woodrow Wilson brought on the IRS and the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve Act came to an end was for 100 years and came to an end in 2013, is that correct?
Yeah, this is where the Pope Francis did the motu proprio. That's why it was done in September of 2013. And then, of course, they breached, and this is why he did that letter directly to Obama, on the heliacal rising of Sirius behind the sun, which is really what July the 4th is. Having nothing to do with the independence crap. No. That was really July the 2nd. They just adjusted that date for historical purposes. You know, when they signed the papers and stuff like that. That's July the 2nd. But because everything is done religiously or cosmologically, ephemerides, they listed in history as July the 4th. But that's really the heliacal rising of Sirius behind the sun. That's really our day of the sun. That's part of our ancient holiday, or days of the sun. And people don't know who rejected, you know, that day and that's the lie and all those, you know, that's their own holidays. So a lot of things, you know, have to be turned around. However, they want to play their game, but nature doesn't recognize person or station. And so things are accelerating. And it has to do not necessarily just with mere opinion. It has to do simply what the ethers are, just what's in the energy. You know, what's in the heavens, as they say. You know, like when they say, you know, like if I'm standing here, right, according to where the light is, you'll see a shadow, right? But in the ethereal world, when I stand just beneath it, it casts no shadows. That's what the Aquarian energy does in reality to the earth. Therefore, no stone shall be unturned. There is no secrets that will not be revealed. And the real deal is that government operations on the planet is for the most part, a total fraud. Total fraud. Dogmata in the name of religion that has been placed on humanity is a total fraud. Fiat, private commercial paper, under the guise of money, is a total fraud. And those trinity of operations is what you see in conflict right now. So the arguments you'll see between the demon parties of the Whigamores, called the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, are dog and pony show with actually the European families fighting to see who will survive this outcome. They'll call it a collapse. Rome didn't collapse, Rome just moved. And then operates under the guise of the United States. Running from England, answer to the Pope. That's how it operates. Now, when you see them 3 stars on them tags out there, that's what they are. Vatican, that middle star is Fleet Street, Westminster, London District, not London proper, London District, right? And this area here called Washington, D.C., District of the Queen of Rome called Columbia. So Rome operates right from here. This is her war machine. Now that the world is waking up is problem for them. That's really what their problem is. So Trump, if you want to play good cop, bad cop, Trump is good cop. You understand? Go ahead, good brother. Give him a mic.
And if anybody else has any questions, please let me know and I'll pass the mic over to you.
I haven't seen you.
Get in the mic so we can hear.
I haven't seen you for a while. But my question is how do we as Moors structure ourselves for this onslaught of everything that's coming? How do we structure ourselves in order to grab our kids and
This is,
bring them along?
in a simple word, in a simple phrase, to keep it simple, honor your mothers and your fathers. In a political sense, that's called nationalization. That's what that's called, really. And I know that most people don't make that relationship because they know that the Septuaginta and the Book of the Dead have been contaminated via the Bible, if you get the point. But if you really know the book and its cosmological nature, you know how to use it against them or as a counter move. Outside of that, it will poison you. Now, point. When you hear the phrase, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, that answers your question. That means if you got a marriage license from the corporate state, rescind the signature, send it back, and make a divine contract between you and your matrimonial mate. Not Mars rage, because marriage is really a curse. It's really a dark curse by the priesthood. They think that's some kind of divine. The issue is matrimony. Back to the matriarchy principle in divine law. Man and woman are in matrimony by divine law, not by some contract where they sell each other to each other under the corporate state, coming under automatic probate with that instrument, bank instrument, with a claim against all the eggs in the uterus of the woman belonging to the Pope, controlled from Fleet Street through the probate courts and to the chancery courts, coming down to the municipal courts of human trafficking. You know, so you need to understand that. So you got to rescind those contracts, although they're linear and although they're misrepresented. If you want to ask, what do we as a people need to do? To keep it simple, is it render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. Start disconnecting every way that you can operating with them. Because anything that they touch, it's already corrupted. If they give you an instrument, it's corrupted. Are we clear? Now, other issue. This is back to the German Dutchman, Eisenhower. And the reason I mentioned that, because most of the stuff most of you know, it's just that a lot of the questions that have been coming from around the country, and some of the people who I talk to outside this country who are still, because remember this is worldwide, this is not just here. Because the same issue is going on around the planet. You know, it's just that this is the core. This is sort of like the hub of the wheel of the evils on the planet. The greatest good is at North America, and the greatest evil is also here. And it's clashing. Solve the problem, there's the name exactly solving it, but bring some balance here, and it will domino around the world. Are we clear? Because the people here have been minimized so greatly, they don't know their importance. They don't know how important to the rest of the world it is, the consciousness that takes place here in the North Gate. You know, and we can emphasize it. And we know some people accept it. Some people look at it as belief, whatever, however, it's vital that they act on it. Now, we know that in short order, Rome is going to start being more open with their own sanctum policy and literally, physically doing things to these people. That there will be no doubt whatsoever that they're not your government, and they're not your friend, and never have been. But to save themselves, they will sacrifice you. You understand? So when you start seeing them doing things to people on the street that doesn't, to your moral sense, damn, How could they do that to that poor woman? You know, and you're looking at it like that, your idea of what you're looking at is kind of incorrect. They're doing what they're put in place to do. The problem that people have is that they keep thinking that these people are law officers. They're commercial mercenaries under unum sanctum. Get over it. Now, what you collectively do, you know, if you want to keep on putting all your energy in your little belief system clubs that are really designed to drain your communities, do it. And what you're doing is sacrificing another generation. When you're strong enough to be honest enough and have enough integrity left in you that resembles something called human, and come together and dump all your belief systems, I don't care what they claim they be, nature herself will start coming to your aid. So a lot of what you're asking for is really waiting for you. It's just that we won't render unto Caesar what is Caesar, because we think it belongs to Jesus, God, Allah, Moses, and Muhammad, that have nothing to do with none of this crap. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? We keep associating things that we have called religion with these images that have nothing to do with them whatsoever. Are we clear? And the other deal where the masses think they have religion and they never have religion. They got dogmata. And so most of their measurements will be made by their beliefs, not by their knowledge. By their beliefs, which is a controlled narrative. So, to be more specific to your question, why we've emphasized it even though we've been telling people for years. We've emphasized it in the last 5 years or so for people to set up a trust, their single trust, and start putting everything in trust, because what that does, it starts killing the bond system. You'll never capture the bond, so stop deluding yourself. You'll never capture the bond, and you'll never capture the straw man. It will never happen. However, you can choke him wherever he may be. Do you understand? By disavowing him. You understand what I'm saying to you? This is demonstrated. If you want a demonstration of it, where Rome tells you, look at the old version of the Wizard of Oz and look at it differently. And they're telling you everything, including the hybrid monkey. They're telling you everything. But this is how they relieve some of their karma. Do you understand? So when you see that house come from the ethers, fall down on the wicked witch, and her stockings curl up, that's what's happening when you declare your nationality. It kills the bonds, them straw instruments that they've been selling all, because the nations know they got dead paper. So if they want to survive, the nations must dump U.S. Treasury bonds. So what they've been doing, not unlike Manchurian families, so this is for you all for your research. Go look at the registry in Manhattan as an example. Over 62% of all commercial buildings are under the control of China. If you understand that, you see the trend that's taking place around the world. Now you understand why Trump has to kill all of the other trade agreements that are dead anyway and has to make new ones. So in order for him to get past the dark priesthood who are countering him, he has to come at you, oh, she's wearing her hair out today. So I think we're going to have to go over there and take our pencils and stuff. And she's got 2 pencils. We're going to have to take one of them. Oh, wow, he's getting ready started. Right, then it comes over there. He's going to take your pencils because, you know, really. And then they see you taking pictures together. He's supposed to be fighting her. You need to understand what you're looking at. Do you? But he has to play the game because they're doing things to other nations to start war. One of the things they've always done is projection. The same thing they did in Boston, right? And the same thing they did in the Mummers Parade in Philly, right? They would take tar and then paint their faces, and then they go do things to other people and say, she did it. And they did it. You know, like when Germany sent for their gold, because they already knew what was happening with Lehman Brothers and stuff, they sent for their gold, and they told them to go take a walk, and 2 days later, them buildings fell down, and they told the world that some Muslims with box cutter knives in a cave in Afghanistan made them buildings come down, and it was really them. All the world knew it except these people here. Now these people here are mad at anybody that's Muslims want to murder them. They hate us and stuff like that. They're jealous of our prosperity. U.S. corporations been running off of Chinese gold since 1955. Get over yourselves. They've been robbing the planet. And the planet is tired of them. And the planet is no longer going to do business with them. Problem with you is that you're sluggish with your belief systems instead of taking care of your real business. And so therefore you don't know national and international trade. You're not in those venues. Because Rome has been dealing with the straw man in your name around the world, claiming to be Americans when they're not, and you have not challenged them. And so that's where your problem is. You understand what I'm saying? So you're going to have to get civically astute. You're going to have to start spending your time dealing with disciplines, not belief systems, which means you've got to get off the treadmill and stop acting like you're in the movement and really get off that treadmill and really do some movement in reality. Now, it's difficult for a lot of people because they've been trained in belief systems and they think it's spirituality. They've been severely convinced that they're spiritual. Well, nature doesn't recognize that bullshit. No, it's true, but I'm not condemning people for being there. I, however, am condemning the leaders for pumping it because they themselves don't believe any of what they've been putting on the public. In secret, they're all Masons. Do you understand what I'm saying? And it's hard for people to accept that, and I understand that. But it's still, you know, if you're going to tell the truth, just tell the truth. And it's just what it is. And if the people, they can't afford to keep putting off starting to know things. You know, they're not going to survive in this era with belief systems. Belief systems must be dropped by humanity. Humanity must start dealing with knowledge. Failure to do so is a guarantee for elimination. When you speak, get in the mic.
Okay, that's one more question.
Please get in the mic.
Okay, I'm still thinking about how we structure the fight back as Moors. For instance,
You gotta get in the mic.
okay, I say I'm still thinking about how do we fight back as Moors? How do we as Moors
Start being yourself.
Okay, but let me ask.
No, I'm giving you start being yourself. Look, listen. 1492 mainly, although it started before then. But this is a turning point. 1492, they accelerated the operations of the Global Estate Trust. And the Global Estate Trust is a political platform run by the Roman Curia. That means all corporate entities under all Western nations, or what they call Christendom, which is really Constantinianism, under the name of Christendom. Are we clear? The brand system, as we were talking earlier, serves the purpose of removing the heirs of the world's estate out of that platform. No such people exist. Are we clear? If they can get you to agree to be any of the brands, you're out of the argument. You're already off the tennis court. You can talk trash all you want to. You're off the court. You understand? And most of our people are arguing the Christian black codes thinking it's an identity. But they do it artfully and passionately, and they got leader guys that they dress in nice suits, They say Jesus, God, Allah, and things like that, and the people, their eyes get started. They work for Rome. It's just that simple, cut and dry. People's difficulty dealing with what I just said doesn't change that reality. Are we clear? That's one of the rude lessons that French Muslim schooled Malcolm when he went over there with that black and white stuff. And they got rid of him quickly because they knew he was going to tell. Are we clear? Same thing with Khalid. As soon as he started telling these people they're Moors, the CIA injected him and made sure he had a Caesar in the hotel up there. Same thing. Because that is the politics of the world. Are we clear? Now, the deal of it is, they only continue the fraud because we support the fraud. Are we clear? We must not support ignorance that we know is ignorant. All right? Now, the people have been put on for so many generations that many of them are afraid to be who they are, so they'll choose one of the brand systems, even engine. Well, we're engines, and all that kind of stuff, to try to please Rome, to get some kind of recognition. North America is not India. South America is not India. The islands are not India. This ain't India, and we ain't engines. You know, that crap was made up unofficially in the 30s. You know, Native American crap. You know, no, we're Moors, the real Americans. That's it, our Moroccans, descendants of Moroccans, that's what that really means. You understand? So it's Mu, Al-Marak, Lemuria, ancient Canaanites, Moabites, that's who we are. That's just simply it. And we were conquered, got our asses kicked. Big deal. Get over it. That's all. You know, some of the things they do is, it affects us personal, but it ain't personal. It's war. That's what the Spanish Inquisition is all about. And the world's politics is the Spanish Inquisition. And what is Spanish? Spanish is a code word put on covering up Moorish history. There's no such thing as Spanish either. Once you understand the real history, you unravel this stuff. Now, if you were, like, say, Mason past 18 degrees, you would be told that. You'd be given it in allegorical stories or told directly. Then you can't tell anybody with a degree less than yours. That's how it works. Are we clear? Are we clear? And if you do it, cut the throat. All right? And so people who have been taken to the mountaintop, that's a code word for Muhammad's mountain. Muhammad's mountain is the great seal that you see on the deck note of the Jesuit order that they call a dollar bill. Oxymoron, a dollar and a bill can't be in the same instrument, but they know these people can't read. Do you understand what I'm saying? And you break that code because they give you certain benefits, then they eliminate you. Do you understand what I'm saying? That's how it works. So get over it. That's how it works. However, how willing are you to deal with the truth? People say they want the truth. Most of them, you give them the truth, they run because it doesn't fit their beliefs. Not their knowledge, their beliefs. That ain't got a damn thing to do with knowledge whatsoever. Has everything to do with mind control. And so they can feel safe with their hypocrisy, they'll hide behind words like Allah, Jesus, Yahweh, etc., Moses, Buddha, in order to deny the bloodline, thinking Rome ain't going to turn them around on that chicken rotisserie. It's just as a big rotisserie. They want drumsticks. Yeah, I was like this for a minute now. See, people think they're getting off with this stuff. You agree to be black, and that's dead, and you're wrong. But the people have gotten used to it, so they actually, particularly the youth who don't have a reference point, actually think it's an identity. You know, so as soon as they go out in the world with it, they get the black codes. And nobody comes to their rescue, because no such people exist. They're not part of the human family, and they're agreeing to it, then. So if you agree to be an elephant, and they have a sign out there, no elephants allowed, if you start marching out there with signs, they figure you're an elephant. And if you're not an elephant, you don't deal with that stuff. Because humanity governed by constitutions and treaties all over the planet. But if you're not part of a nation state, you can't argue those instruments because they're for the human family. They're not for people who are property and who agree to be property and then want to get mad and march all over the place and make fools of themselves. So, again, answering your question, these platforms that we've adopted as culture must be cleaned up by you. They can't be cleaned up by someone else. You have to clean this mess up. We adopted this mess. We agreed to it by tacit acquiescence, by not rebutting it. Do you understand? And a lot of this is, I'm gonna get to you, sis. A lot of this stuff is not unknown, it's just been lost to the last maybe 5 generations or so. You know, maybe 5 generations ago, some were 4, but mostly safe to be safe, 5 generations. If you call these people black, you have a fight. Now they think it's some kind of proud African identity or spirituality of the carbon melanin of the universe of Venus. And they really, and then you have guys who are paid to promote that in the name of black power, of the melanin, of Afrocentricity, of the pyramids of Kemet of Egypt and shit. It's bullshit. It's absolute bullshit. And it takes them out of the human family. Then when they get the black codes treatment, damn, ow, ooh, that's so unfair. Then they want to go to court. And then when they get shafted, which they will do, get shafted, after they drain all their finances, jumping through the hoops. Oh, they're racist. Race is the human species. They can't read yet. Race is the human species. Donkey. Like, are there any humans around here that understand that race is the human species? Oh, they don't understand? They're incompetent. Now they're mad again. You understand? The human species on this planet is extended families called nations. Not colors, nations. You choose not to go along the rules of civilization, then you're outside of the rules that protect humans by your agreement. It's not to say that someone's not taking advantage of you, but you choose not to fix that, then you agree to that platform. So if you want to come in here selling pit bulls and talk about this is a pit bull and he got strong bones and you know you sell him for $700 and go ahead, Fred, do your thing. We're getting deals. Pit bull. And he goes meow, and you upset because now you lost the sale. Well, our people don't understand when they go around calling themselves monkeys, which the word Negro means monkey. They don't even know what it means monkey. You can't call me monkey and shit. They agree to be Negroes. That's what a monkey is. Monkeys are Negroes. Negro able, like chimpanzee monkey. Anthropopithecus. But they can't read, they never saw a dictionary. That's their choice. They're so spiritual. They know God and Jesus and Allah. They certainly should know their bloodline. Because the law begins with your bloodline. Now, you ain't down with that, you got a right not to be down with that. You also have a right to the codes that go with such people that are outside of the human family. It's tough cookies. Now, that's not defending what's going on, this is saying what's going on. It is what's going on. So this is where the brand system comes in. They misclassify you, you don't rebut it, and they have a code system for such persons. And this is what the brand system is for. That's why they created the brand system. It's also why the European German families that came to North America put their family names on people of Moorish descent. That's why they did it. It has a legal function. That must be understood. It's not just a grammatical flaw or a corruption of a nom de guerre category. It is to make such persons not descendable. Now, all of those things are in operation today. What you see, thank you so much, is and are those operations being accelerated? by necessity. They even call it the rule of necessity. They do. So a lot of things that appear totally immoral to you are not necessarily approached from that perspective. They're actually acts of war. You know, that ain't mad, it's for the empire. Are we clear? So back to you. Donald Trump is like caught in between. And now, with him doing this citizenship question, the census, you gotta remember, the census set up by the United States Corporation Operators of the Jesuit, of the Barristers of England, is for the most part a colored document. Half of the designations on there are totally false. But because the world, when I say the world, we're talking in general, are no longer buying US Treasury bonds, which is the base of their economic system. You gotta keep this in mind. Whereas we're forced to use the Jesuits' Federal Reserve notes. And all your board members of the Federal Reserve are members of the Roman Curia, so get that out of the way immediately. Are we clear? And either direct or honorary members of the Jesuits. Are we clear? That's a fact, not fiction, fact, all right? So get over yourself. Now, in '61, when they got Lincoln out of the way, that was the last legitimate political platform, even though it was getting corrupted. That's the last legitimate political platform operating at North America. From Lincoln on, everything's de facto, on all levels, not some, on all levels. Right? So all politicians know that, all your Masons know that, all your Ghouls know that, all your Templars know that, all your Maltas know that, all Eastern Stars know that, all Shriners know that. The only people that don't know that is the everyday people who pay their Roman tax called the tithe that they think going to Jesus or Allah and charity of the mosque. And it's all Roman tax. Are we clear? Now, the bond systems that are run in all of your municipal platforms are really bonds that are leaned against bonds that are leaned against bonds that are leaned against bonds all the way back to the first of the Moors who were branded Negro, black, colored, Indians, etc. That is the foundation of the conquest of the Western Hemisphere under the Roman Curia operations of the Global Estate Trust. Are we clear? Their routing numbers through the 12 orders of the Jesuit, of the Franciscan Brotherhood, would be also called 12 districts of the Federal Reserve. Are we clear? Are we clear? Yeah. These are regions of the dividing of the Moorish Empire under operational unum sanctum. Are we clear? So now no one's buying their bonds. So whereas we trade, as an example, with Federal Reserve notes, they trade with bonds. Are we clear? So governments don't trade with the Federal Reserve note as you look at it, even if they call it the petrodollar. That's a misnomer for the dumb public. They trade with bonds. Are we clear? And notes against bonds that have numbers that you got a lot of commas. All right, and the payback is your estates. That's what they've done. Even your children, that's what the marriage certificate is for. So whatever inheritances that your children would get already belongs to the state. That's called the hypothecation. And so they make a bond against that, all right? So the marriage certificate is the first gateway in, and the German Dutchman, no, that was Eisenhower. You see, Roosevelt, Skull and Bones, pledged the birth certificates. That's House Joint Resolution 192, 73rd Congress in session June the 5th, 1933. when they went bankrupt again and they had to create another shell. So you got all these United States shells that have a series of dead shells, have similar names, but are still unum sanctum operation. This is what the Pope was talking about in that letter he wrote to Obama and told him to stop the shit. Are we clear? That's after they breached motu proprio of 2013. Now, while they're in breach, keep in mind the rest of the world, although they're still being attacked, they're being attacked constantly all over the world, keep this in mind. Recognize that if they don't come together, Rome will systematically eliminate them anyway. Are we clear? And this is where you get the so-called BRICS alliance, and then you have the real American states with the OAS. And this is where you had them contesting when they introduced Clinton as the American president, and they contested it. He's not American. Well, you got to do the same thing. When I say you, that's us plural. All of the things that they do to hypothecate the state, you have to demonstrate to the world that you are cognate, competently rejecting Rome. That would be called rendering unto Caesar what is Caesar's. If you don't do it, that's tacit acquiescence. That gives him mandate. That's what they've been operating on, mandate. Not that the information hasn't been out there, the people have rejected it as a belief system or religion, and therefore not taking it serious and not acted on it. That's what our problem is. Are we clear? Now, as we were talking earlier, the same thing with Epstein. Well, the same thing they're doing with them islands they did with Isabella. And Isabella is called in Reconstruction history Cuba. And remember, they've been under the Spanish Inquisition of conquistadors, doing the same thing in the Atlantis island, the string, Borican, Dominica, Jamaica, etc., Honduras, raping the little girls. And so that's why a lot of the Moors from the South think they're Puerto Ricans. They're Moors, do you understand? And as we were talking, sis, earlier with your family, Filipinos, they're Moors too. They're Filipinos for the Pope Philip. And so as long as these people don't render unto Caesar, what they don't know is Caesar's gonna kill them and steal their estates. And again, back to your question, and this is redundant because we're saying the same thing over for 40 years. I mean, you keep telling these people, but what they don't know, they don't have a lot of time. As a matter of fact, kind of like having no time. And that's because Rome is being attacked by the rest of the world now. In other words, since we've been pretty much so compromised that we're already on the way out from a genocidal perspective. People don't know it, they're being genocided out. While they're in denial, they're being genocided out. The rest of the world ain't having it. And if these people here insist on being artificial people, which means people of color, that's what it means, artificial, and they want to be taken out, the rest of the world is not going to sacrifice themselves just because we've sacrificed these generations and sold out. And so they know that individually they cannot beat Rome because Rome already has our ancient technology that the people think is new technology. Are we clear? Including ray machines and stuff like that that turn dirt into crystal. All deserts are artificial. None of them are natural. They're from ancient rivers. Now, people know how things operate, know that that's for real. And this is another reason why they have been reluctant to take these Romans out who've been murdering the world from North America under that threat. People are talking about nuclear, child's play. That's for the public. That's bullshit. That's just to keep you busy. It's them death rays that they're really afraid of. Are we clear? That's why they call it scorched earth. And it really means exactly that. Now, but the deal of it is, they figure if Asia really unites and stop their divisions under the Spanish Inquisition that has been going on for a couple hundred years, that they can choke Rome's economic system because it's based on the T-bonds and it's based on the nations being forced to buy them. Are we clear? Apparently, what's happening on the planet is that enough nations have gotten the guts enough to start dumping what they call the petrodollar, which means the unum sanctum private commercial paper of the Jesuit order controlled by the Chancery Church of the Circle at Fleet Street, England. You understand? So there, back to Estein. So what you see there on this island now is what they did to Cuba until Castro nationalized Cuba and told the Constantinians to go home. They'll call them Christians, they're Constantinians. Say you can go on the ship, you can get frog feet, you can get some balloons, but your ass is leaving here.
Venezuela as well.
That's what, yeah, that's exactly what Chavez, that's why they murdered him too. And also what Hitler did with Germany after the Treaty of Versailles, when the Khazarians were raping Germany. So even that history that the public is given is a false history. It is a total false history. You know, but that same principle is what has to be done on the planet in order to save humanity. But yet that's only a stage because we're not going to stay at that level. It's just that you must go through that to evolve to the next stage. That's going to be accelerated. You understand? The deal is, and so, well, Rome is going to do everything they can to divide everybody against each other. Keep them fighting with each other, keeping them arguing race when that ain't the issue. The issue is unum sanctum. And dump everything from Rome, set up a trust, put everything in trust, even them stinky sneaks that you don't want anymore. They'll write a bond against that too. So once you understand how their system works, you can't capture the straw man, but you can choke it. And so what it makes it dead where whoever they sold it to, their treasury is dead. Now because, again, like we said, the masses don't understand economic system. So they think, they got some Federal Reserve notes, so they think they getting paid, they think they got finance. No, they don't. It is the bonds. So when you look at the Manchurians controlling 62%, and I think that's about 3 years ago. I don't know what the rate is right now because I haven't checked with them. As of about 3 years ago, they controlled 62.5% of all commercial buildings in Manhattan. So you know what that represents. You understand now? People who don't understand it think, well, China's doing this too. They ain't doing shit. They're collecting on them pristine treasury bonds that the Jesuit order have been selling to them since '54 and earlier fraudulently. And what they're doing, since they can't cash them, they're using the bonds to buy up to the states. Same thing they're doing in Philadelphia and Detroit. So people who don't understand politics trying to act like China's doing something to us. It's bullshit. Go ahead, Fred and Cheryl.
Okay, yeah. I just wanted to bring up 2017, I believe it was the winter solstice, December 21st. D. Trump, he signed an executive order to go after child trafficking, pedophilia rings, at the same time to compensate all of the wealth of those individuals who will be brought to justice for.
And it's starting to unfold.
And it's starting to unfold.
Yes.
So the point I'm trying to bring out, there's gonna be a lot of money that's gonna try to be hidden somewhere without being tracked. Cause if you know that this man is coming after you, cause he got your buddy, then you got all this wealth and he can take it from you, what are you supposed to do with your wealth?
Well, look at it this way. The masses may or may not have been aware of that they had a shutdown of the White House the other day. And snipers all over the place. And they turned Pence's plane around. You know, they want to get rid of this man badly. Now, because the masses have been so miseducated, they know if they don't do this slowly, that the people themselves will overthrow Trump to their own demise. You understand what I'm saying to you? And because they've been threatening his family, etc., even though he's a made man, you gotta understand he's still a made man. You know, he's gonna be a witness against Epstein. But see, the deal of this, Trump is only a figurehead. The same way the other operations go, you know, what you're seeing is not what you're getting. So even if they got to him, it's on, it's done. So that's that. And the same way that, you know, all of your US oligarchs under the guise of congressmen and senators, that's the Roman Senate. They're not sent for the people here. They're really lobbyists for the unum sanctum operations, and they've hollowed the country out. They've already done that. However, to keep their child trafficking going on, this is why Pelosi and them don't want no border. What, the Bush family and the Clintons control the drugs. That's just a fact. And of course, the Kennedy family too, they control a lot of the liquor. They're all part of that network, the Pierces and all the rest of them. And so that's the really reason why they don't want that fence. But at the same time, you know, so they're arguing the principle of American rights while they don't really mean it. You know? See, because the real deal, that fence should have been put up in 1492. But not at Mexico. Do you understand? So since you didn't get one, see, China had sense to put that wall up. There's no reason why they survived this long. But the deal of it is, we're paying the price for it. Our ignorance and going into treaty with them, and they breached. And here we go. This is where it's at. But the problem with many people, they don't know treaty, constitution, ordinance, or nothing. They just deal with belief systems. They're looking for Reverend Bigfoot to march from all over the place and beg for rights. They don't know nothing about constitutional principles whatsoever. They're totally incompetent. And so that gives the Romans mandate. That's what they've been operating. They've been operating on mandate, on the fact that these people insist on being ignorant. Insist on being ignorant. Will not deal with facts. Will not deal with facts. They only deal with beliefs. They're getting ready to be eliminated.
So my understanding is that we should close their bank accounts and open up a trust.
Everybody should, but it shouldn't be under them. It should be a private international trust.
Like an accredited.
Anything you deal with them is contaminated.
Private international.
Yes. The only thing you do with them is give them notice so that they don't assume, because they're operating on a hypothecation. Rayan.
Yes.
Now, back into the argument of reversion of a state, you don't have to, but it must be in the nature of you literally having it known publicly that you do not stand as surety for the debts of the Jesuits under the United States Corporation. And you must, in the nature of your communication, separate the United States Corporation for what it is, and in no writing allow them to have you assume that it is a country. At any point that's not clear, your position is breached.
When you say, let it be known to the public, is the minimum,
Meaning above all, in your, my,
in the minimum
our
notice,
claims, that the nature, that part must be clear.
or minimum notice, could it be the public officials as well?
Because they're not public officials, they're private oligarchs. See, what is one of the things that, because a lot of things we're saying now, is not that we haven't said over and over and over and over again, it's that people appear not to really get it. As long as your language, every mistake that you make, that's us, period, in your communication with them, it is no different than you're in the boxing ring and you get relaxed and put your left down and then you get punched in the eye. You make a mismove, you're getting hooked. You start doing like this, there's your ribs. You better learn what the defense is. Anybody that does not claim publicly their right of the state, it is assumed abandoned. They operate from that position factually. So if you're thinking you always close those gates, no matter what your other arguments are. Now, you may use, as we were talking earlier, Supreme Court cases as reference points for support, but they're not your position. They are supports for your position that in itself must be in propria persona sui juris already.
But when you start writing it, do you use as a reference like a Black's Law Dictionary? What dictionary are you
Well,
writing?
any Bouvier's, Black's Law, doesn't matter, you must know the language, because everything is done, keep this in mind for everyone. And notice that we're not talking anything new. Law and history goes together. If you're operating not with that knowledge, you're already at a disadvantage. If you disrespect that, that's a willing acquiescence and you're going to get your ass kicked. Now you can decide, when I say you were talking plural, to stop putting all of our energy in these belief clubs and turn that energy around into learning law and history and exercising it as deeply and as strongly and as fast and as competently as we can. And teaching somebody who does not know. The sooner you do that, the sooner you'll be on your path to semi-liberation. I ain't saying liberation, semi-liberation. But you'll start a momentum that will be enough to start putting brakes on Rome, which is what you want to do. And Rome will be doing so many negative things that it'll become obvious to the public that they have been wrong in their passive position and will be inspired by the pain of their asses getting kicked and their houses and their property being stolen and accounts that they thought was theirs being confiscated that you won't have to tell them anymore. Problem is that they'll be on a learning curve while under attack. Are we clear? We're doing what we're doing, trying to get you past that, knowing that all of us still are studying and learning, but at least you won't get in the ring not knowing, don't go in the ring taking selfies, because it's not a good position to be in. You know what I mean? This guy going, you're the Mike Tyson thing, and you up there talking about, keep that up. And that's basically what we've been doing in the political realm with our belief systems. We've been preoccupied marching and praying with belief systems and following guys that we think know Allah, Jesus, Yahweh, and all this stuff. And these guys have been just simply pilfering your pockets, keeping you busy while you get raped. While privately, I guarantee all of them got trust. All of them do.
Who do they file the trust with? Are they filed with the national court?
Because everything operates on trust.
So is it filed here?
You don't file, you do. See, we got to get out of this idea of doing things with them.
And look, y'all gonna have to use the mic, all right, when y'all ask the question. But we got a brother right here, he wants to say something.
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead, good brother.
Islam, everybody. My name is, my given name is Michael Gerard Clark. I say that because it translates to spirit, he who is
Yes.
like God,
Yes.
and son of a scribe. I grew up in the Catholic Church. I was a police officer in the town of Leesburg. I commanded troops during Desert Storm. I've been a legislative assistant to 2 members of the House of Representatives. I
Yes.
say that to say to you, I understand what you're saying. I also heard this gentleman's question. You have to prepare here, and you have to understand your enemy. Just study history. Look at what just happened. Our enemy is the Caucasoid, in my opinion. Maybe that's incorrect speech. I've come here tonight to accept my appellation, to reject my my given name. I bring you greetings from the brothers in Reston. The Moors in Reston, the handful that are out there, we're a growing number.
Greetings.
2 years ago, I was argumentative. My argument was, how are we going to fight against an enemy that totally abandoned or totally broke 400 treaties with the so-called
Yes.
American Indian?
Yes,
Well, you have to study your enemy. First, you have to know yourself.
yes,
You have to study your enemy. And you have
Yes.
to understand your enemy's weaknesses. And you have to
Yes.
understand your strengths.
yes,
I pledged to fraternity back in 1983, and the things that I learned during that process, that's the baby and the bathwater. I don't belong to Omega Psi-Phi anymore, but I learned discipline, I learned myself, I learned principles of manhood, scholarship, perseverance, and uplift, and I have a tribe that I'm raising. And my sons, I have 2 handsome young sons who are African Americans right now, but they're Moors. They need to understand the law, but they also need to understand not to let anybody put their hands on them. They have a
Yes.
father, and their father has several brothers, and these brothers will come to their aid. And we will do it legally, and if need be, I like kicking a little bit of ass on a regular basis, so that's what we have to be prepared to do. And, you do have to educate yourself. You do have to understand what the law, whatever their policies are, how they apply to you. You don't have to know them all. You just have to know the ones you're gonna run into. You drive on the road, you have to understand what they say your rights are, but what your rights as a diplomat are. Because
now,
that's-
and now this is where, just like
Thank
you
you.
come, this is where stare decisis comes in. Supreme Court stare decisis and res judicata. And these are fundamentals that can be taught quickly in any small venue. You start with the children. And for the most part, is that the people don't know their rights. Secondly, they don't know that police officers are members of the gangs of New York. They are commercial mercenaries. And you don't get angry at them. The other thing that you want to recognize is start going after their bonds. Learning to go after their equity bonds, and then go to after the equity bonds of their private corporations that these people keep thinking is their government, which is not. They're under occupation. See, one of our greatest problems is that our people have been trained under what they call black leadership, who they don't know are 32 and 33 degree Masons, and in secret got a Moorish fez, and going around pumping this black thing and marching them all over the place, making fools out of themselves while lining their pockets and then lining the pockets of the corporate entities. When they come at you in any format, your organization should be immediately, by protocol, going after their equity bond. The individuals and the corporate entities. Most of the corporate entities, if you worked for, say, the police department, you know that most of them have what you call cover bonds. When by law, they should be individually bonded. Now, what happens is when they get breached, the people are trained to protest and march all over the place when they should be training them to go after their equity bonds, their surety bonds. What happens is, and this is what's happening on the larger scale around the world, they can't float bonds anymore. Once you start see, because they'll go from A rating to AB rating to BB rating, then they can't borrow any finance. What's happening right now around the planet is that the credit windows are freezing up. They're doing what they can to stop that, but the credit windows are freezing up. The trade windows, 90% are already frozen, are we clear? So now the credit windows are freezing up, and that's how they operate. The economic system of the trust infiltration under the Sister QB trust operations of the Q6 are on credit, not on dollars. If you can get these people to understand that, we've got to kind of rise above our concept of the Federal Reserve notes that we carry in our pocket that we're forced to use, and comprehend that governments operate on trust bond systems, not on the Federal Reserve note, and that if they can't move them bonds, their shit collapses, and that's how you kill the straw. You'll never capture the straw.
How do you attack a bond?
This is what happens. Like in every municipal operation, but remember, the municipalities are subdivisions of the curia. Their operations is to denationalize the people and to steal the people's estate while veiling it. That's the political. The politics, the art of the politics is to rape you and train you not to recognize that you're being raped. Are we clear? Now, all people that claim to be public servants, but they're publicly serving themselves, that's really what's going on, is to keep you from figuring that out. Are we clear? And then to keep your Negro marching leader guys, called civil rights guys, keep you marching around distracted, thinking that they know Jesus and they're going to do some good for you, when in secret they got a 501c3 skull and bones agreement, kickback, and they're subdivisional spies for Rome under the bishopric order of the Jesuits. That's a fact. I don't care if they say they're Baptist, Methodist, whatever they, don't go for the bullshit. Or, you know, whether it's Happy the Clown or Bozo, they're clowns. Get over it. Now, you go after their bonds. Like, say for instance, if you were out there and they stop you because you got tinted windows, they're good for that. Right? You got tinted windows and shit, right? And they start giving you tickets and messing with you and stuff like that. Don't argue with them too much. You can ask them for probable cause. Get them to say things. Record. Get used to recording with them. Because remember, they're all criminals. And they know they're criminals. They know that the masses don't know they're criminals. Are we clear? In law, they're called highwaymen. Are we clear? In law, they're called highwaymen. Now, the masses, being ignorant as they are, think that they're law officers. They're not. They're commercial mercenaries. Now, to do business in the political platform, any communications that they have with what you call the public, they must have a bond. Are we clear? A bond in the political realm is what is called a license. Are we clear? Now that's their license to do business. Upon request, that's supposed to be public knowledge. They hide it because they don't want you to start going after them bonds. So they usually will fund different civil rights organizations to keep the Negro marching guys paid up, to make them, whenever you have a problem, they already call them and they show up out of the woodworks to march you around. Oh, they're racist. And what we really need to do is we need some jobs in our black community of color, of the colored people. And you know, they're really racist guys and they really shouldn't do that. And we want them to know that. And everybody say, whoa, he really said that. You know, and then they calm down again. They just took their Ritalin pill. And they're back to the Negro accident the next day. And that's how it works. Now, what you gotta do is get them guys out of the way, those overseers out of the way, right? And you go after the equity bonds and you start training and teaching everyone in your community about equity bonds. And as soon as they breach, even if they write you a ticket, make a lien against their bond.
But the question is, how do you make a lien against it, though?
Because the Supreme Court said they don't have the right to do what they do, but the people won't enforce the Constitution.
In other words, what I'm saying is, like, say you do an international commercial lien against them.
Well, you can do that, but you
But do you,
can, yeah,
do you use a notary?
you can do that too. Either way, any
But
kind
that's
of way
still
that you
coming
do.
That's still coming under there.
Let me say this to you. Any kind of angle that you use, do a lien against their bond, that's the point. Failure to lien is an acquiescence. They know they're criminals, but you must know that the magistrates who fakely call themselves judges are part of the network, which is why you don't get remedy. See, the people's idea that these people are separate in their activities is part of the problem. The Organic Act of Congress 1871 is their political platform of demonology called the democracy. That is against the republic, which is what you're suffering from. You got two different political platforms, one that's sleeping, which is the legitimate, which is the republic, and the feudal order of the democracy, which is the traitors, which includes the magistrates that you keep calling judge. You see the point? So you gotta stop calling them what they are not, and you gotta start going after their bonds, but you must be and should be organized. In other words, all the energy that we've been putting in our little belief groups, that we've been calling church, mosque, synagogue, and all this stuff that have been keeping you busy, you need to stop giving them your energy. And you take all that energy and put it into civic organizations for constitutional enforcement. And be competent. And systematically, immediately, by protocol, go after their individual bonds, and then go after their municipal, corporate, city, and other bonds, every bond system. As soon as they start engaging you talking shit, go after their bonds. Don't complain, don't march, don't pray, go after their bonds. Start building databases and sharing it with each other. They got a database on you, and if you think they don't, keep fooling yourself. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? And this is back immediately. See, the protocol, this is what happens. Some people get conscious and they start operating individually, but the deal of it is it's collective. Are we clear? Individually, you can be right as two right shoes, still two left shoes, whatever. And they will breach you because they know that the masses are on their side. This is even why Trump has to do what he's doing, slow walking, because willfully stupid. You start talking to the Republic and the masses say our democracy. And so now this is what the shit you got. This is why when Trump talks, they think he's out to lunch. Because he's talking Republic and they're talking democracy. They don't know democracy is mob rule. That's what's wrong with it. That's why people don't have no rights. That's why they're stealing all your property. That's how they're gentrifying the community. Stealing all your property. That's how they're gentrifying the communities. All under that platform. All under that platform.
Will you be able to bring it back?
Use the mic, bro. Use the mic. Use the mic. Use the mic. Use the mic. Use the mic.
What is happening, I bear witness to what you're saying, because from last year and a half, since I started filling out affidavits,
Yes.
they have, all the courts work, the judges work together, but if you continue to fight them, that's not, well, from my experience, that's the only way I have been able to defend myself for my property and also for credit cards and stuff like that, because and keeping the paperwork is very important, because
You're making a public statement.
right.
Because what you're saying to them in law, I do not stand as surety for the false debt of the Jesuit order via the United States Corporation and its franchised municipalities and corporate businesses. Public. So basically, you step into a right position of reversion.
Right.
Now, other issue, are you in propria persona making that argument?
Yes.
Now, and so now you have standing.
And I have the paperwork, because they purposely took advantage, wrote things, threatened,
That's what they do.
Right.
Now, why, and this is for everybody, because they are commercial mercenaries.
Correct.
They're not your government. They are governing your affairs under the Spanish Inquisition, imposturing as government, legitimate, and using the sovereign platform of the Republic to exercise democracy platform of feudal law. That must be comprehended by everybody, and you must make the distinction.
They are not.
So when you're talking to them, you must talk to them with that cognizance,
Yeah.
not similar, not estimatedly around that area. You must specifically let that commercial mercenary pretending to be a judge, and that is called, write this down, quo warranto. Quo warranto. Q-U-O, first word, warranto, just like warrant with an O at the end. This is standard, are we clear? Civic operations. Rayon?
Yes.
That would be issued to these persons who are bouncing you around. Now, your argument in principle of process, in general, is correct. But I think, from, as we talk, that's in the area where they're coming at you because you say that you reverted, I don't know. Reversion of estate and quo warranto. And going after, we gotta stop looking at, the city, that type of thing, or the township, no. Joe Belaski Bendini, acting as such office for the private corporation, and find the date of the registration of that corporate entity. You go after his bond, and you go after the bond of that municipal. And then date after that, you get a few of them, and they can't float any bonds, then they're gonna start collapsing. That's what's happening to Chicago right now, that's what's happening to Detroit, and that's what's happening to Los Angeles. Because enough conscious people are now going after their bonds. You need to know what's really happening. You understand? And you gotta get on top of this stuff while this stuff is moving, because it's moving fast. And they're going to be eliminating as many people's estates as they possibly can to hold off their collapse. They'll sacrifice the people first. Knowing what's taking place, because we told you this was what they're going to do to you. So it's just that people who it hasn't happened to yet, they're just in the row. They don't know they're in the row. So we're giving you tools, but we have to depend on you really doing some studying and understanding jurisdiction, and understanding limit of jurisdiction, and understanding where you stand, and understanding there's something that you, the single unit, must do in order to even have standing in your argument, although your argument is absolutely correct. You under the black codes, that shit don't count. And the other weakness is that we keep doing it as individuals. Now, logically, the remedy belongs to you by right, but you gotta remember, these are feudalists. These are people that are against the republic. You just thought they were legitimate government, and so when you're talking to them, back to what you're saying, there's an assumption that these people are constitutionalists. They're not constitutionalists. 90% of these people in these offices are traitors. And it's established. That's what the Act of Congress 1871 is. Not to know that means that you're going to constantly be going at them confused because they're not honoring the Constitution and treaty. They're not there for that. They're waging war. They're criminals. Treat them accordingly, but hold them to the office that they're claiming. And go after their bonds. Failure to do that, well, you keep on playing with them. They ain't gonna take your shit. That's what they intend to do. They're gonna liquidate everybody's estate to satisfy their debt that's already unpayable, that they're claiming belongs to you, that never belonged to you in the first place. There's no such thing as national debt. Doesn't damn exist. It's all fraud. It's all unum sanctum, all of it.
IRS.
So it's not a condition. IRS is an accounting arm for the Jesuits.
So is that what they're doing when they're,
Oh.
what they call a
Hold on,
procession?
bro. Hold
I
on.
can't say it
Right
too
here, right here,
loud.
right here, right here, right here. You've been waiting.
Again, Todd, I just want to share with them what you.
Stay in the mic, please.
I
Don't
wanna-
stay in the mic.
Okay, I want to share with them what you taught me, and I'm gonna put it in some simple words. First, you gotta know that you're a sovereign. If you're a sovereign, then what does a sovereign do? You know the laws, you know whether or not you're talking to a de facto organization and what have you, and you present yourself in a manner in which, not arguing, but that you're stating the law. I know you're de facto. I know that our people wanted the organic republic, because they're always talking democratic. That's like you said, that's against.
So you do, you're talking the
Right.
demon platform.
So the thing is that you gotta start thinking, I'm a sovereign and I don't have to ask them for permission, but I do need to be competent enough to tell them why they shouldn't be talking.
And don't let them call you sovereign citizen. That's a trap. That's a trick. And they're trying to muddy the water because people are waking up. Are we clear? They're trying to muddy the water. But understand those are tricks.
Taj, I'm not sure if you're aware of the tweet that he made. I hear a lot of guys keep mentioning Trump.
Stay in the mic, please. Yeah.
And I wanted to read this tweet so everybody can
Yeah, go ahead
understand
and
his
share with us.
position. So here he wrote 6:53 p.m. September 18th, somewhere between the 19th and 18th. Question. You people trying to insult my intelligence. This is Trump. If I read the U.S. Constitution, and we understand that U.S. capital dot S, he's strictly talking about the Constitution that applies to the corporate entity.
Stay in the mic, please.
U.S. Constitution, he says, okay, capital is, okay. How many of you are able to figure out how the 14th Amendment works, question mark? In case nobody knows, the infamous 14th Amendment was designed to put people as a legal fiction, giving up your rights for privilege and immunities. By voting for me, anyone in office, you commit a crime against your Republican form of government. That's powerful. Try to figure that out first, then ask me if I read the U.S. Constitution, capital U.S. Once again, he's referring to the corporate constitution that only applies to the parties that are part of that corporate municipality. So when we go into these trading venues, once again, whether we in appropriate persona or whether we in pro se, whether you're using their colorful name, whether you're using any of their license instrument, whatever, when you mention that constitution, you're automatically in contempt, and as the judge going to tell you, you're not a party to it because you're not part of that municipality. It simply is, the conquered cannot be part of those who conquered. You understand what I'm saying? Like, you can't be with the slavers who keep the slaves in check and then still try to get a benefit. And that's the whole real reason why we consistently get in this pool of nonsense. So I just wanted to share that text.
Yes.
And I hope that you guys really go do your research and follow him on Twitter, follow the things that he truly, expound on, and when you follow it, leave your emotions somewhere else. Right?
Okay, I don't have emotions, but let me say this. What I'm trying to say is that we gotta understand.
No, get in the mic.
What I'm trying to say is we gotta understand there's two constitutions. One is for the United States.
And one is of.
And one is of.
Of is the corporation.
The one for is the one that we need, which was with our.
And the of is the one that he was explaining.
The one of is all
It has
cap.
nothing to do
Is
with
an all
us.
cap that made a corporation. Then they turned around after they made that a corporation, and since they couldn't deal with human flesh, from what I've been reading, then they turned around and made people corporations too in order to make that whole program.
That's the
work.
14th Amendment.
Right, exactly, make that whole program work. And all I'm saying is that you got to be a sovereign, and you gotta do as Todd is telling you, you gotta read to know why.
Now-
Go ahead.
Point.
I just said this one thing, we're grown men now, we don't, this is what Todd's taught me, and I've been doing it since. We're grown men now, we don't believe nothing, we go do facts. I just left the Library of Congress today looking for some things, which I'm gonna talk to them about later. But the point is, we have to step in there and say, I am sovereign, I govern myself. Why? Because I'm now mentally capable. Because when we make that proclamation, we telling the people, now we no longer a minor. You know, we are major. We mentally competent here, and we're also grown. And that's all I'm saying. You have to stick with that.
Now, let me add to that. And I'm gonna show you how easily it is to start dealing with territorial jurisdiction without arguing the technicality of territorial jurisdiction. Once you start calling people who they are, not estimatedly, you're immediately solving the issue of territorial jurisdiction. One of the mistakes that our people keep making is that they keep calling the Europeans Americans and then trying to argue rights. You just gave them your birthright. Call Europeans Europeans, that's not an insult, that's who they are. Call yourself American, that's who you are. You mix the two, you gave up your birthright. You keep on mixing or allowing them to get away with calling their political platform America without a challenge, you gave up your birthright. If you hire a lawyer and attorney into your affairs, you gave up your birthright. If you don't study constitutional principle that's come from Muslim law, because it absolutely did, you gave up your birthright. If you don't know the distinction before the Constitution for the United States, which is the legitimate Constitution under treaty law, and with the Constitution of the United States, which is what you're making reference to, which is the 14th Amendment platform, and you mix them two, you just lost. Now, the deal of it is, above all, is to stop calling them who they're not and stop calling you who you're not. It becomes very clear, like for instance, when you look at the rules of the Ku Klux Klan right now arguing with Trump about that wall, right? And so they're blocking him on every front. It appears that they're concerned with Americans. They're not concerned with Americans, they're concerned with the human trafficking routes that they have and the drug routes that they have, all right? Including the fact that they're using other Americans called Mexicans as slave labor in the southern states and southern Khalifa's land that they call California, and in Texas, which is still Mexico, and parts of Nevada, still Mexico. And so there's a conflict, but in order to save their platform, they have to start dealing with the issue of diversity while trying to hide the argument of diversity at the same time. Conflict, but it must be done, but you must recognize what's going on. And if you're wise, seize the advantage of the moment. See, because this is what's happening. With all the fraud going on, they're being forced to deal with the issue of diversity, because they can't argue diversity. So they're arguing against Mexicans and others on the diversity issue without really refining the argument. Do you understand what I'm saying? You refine the argument and they're the only alien. It's what it is. You know, and so the things that they're using against the Americans, if you're wise, you can use it against them. Now, again, you have that coupled with the fact that the nations aren't buying the T-bonds, and it's well on its way to what they call collapsing, if you get the point. Though that's plausible. So when you look at Morgan and them, and the Rothschild, Red Shield, yes, all right. What they're trying to do, they're trying to get it into digital form so they can reinvigorate their platform, including the RV that they're talking about. But my thoughts are, while all these different venues and avenues are being promoted to kind of bring a little bit of remedy, my thoughts are to choke the straw man by setting up trust, propria persona, work any of these systems that you feel, we don't have to agree with them. Anything that represents a rejection of their platform, I promote. Do you understand? Although I know UCCs are plausible, you understand? It's anything that demonstrates that you're rejecting Rome, because what you're doing is firing them. Are we clear? In doing so. Meanwhile, you must do some serious study, but anything that resembles applying to them with something, you always gonna lose. Always gonna lose. If anything, you just notify them. You put them on notice. And don't let them call you sovereign citizen. That's the biggest fraud. You can't be sovereign citizen. That's like an oxymoron. That's like saying halfway pregnant. You know what I mean? It is. It's an oxymoron. But they're doing that because it's having an effect. It's having an effect on them. You understand? And that is the treasury bonds are dying. Now, again, like I was saying, you know, if you look at even some of the refinement arguments that you know, that's because you study and because you do study. And the same, but you have to admit and recognize that most of our people are on a strong learning curve in these areas. And before they really get grounded, they will be already sacrificed. So what I always look at is how can we put a nail in the vampire's coffin, even with a child that doesn't know much? First, declare your nationality. 2, never call Europeans white people. 3, never call Europeans Americans. There's no need to call them Caucasoid because all Europeans are not Caucasoid. We're only talking about those that we delivered to the mountains. That's an area, you understand? And so when you're talking about Cushitis, there's an assumption kind of talking about the Germanic hybrids as Caucasians. But it's not exactly correct, although the name is adopted from Cushitis. You know, just call them the truth. They're Europeans or German tribes. All European nations are German, all of them. Whether it's England, France, etc., they're all German. All right? So the sooner we start telling the truth about humanity, the sooner the truth about humanity comes out. Until the truth of humanity comes out, see, because this is the deal. They've muddied the water so they could steal people's estates. And as long as we exercise that muddied water, we give them mandate. Are we clear? All right, we're gonna seal some papers.
Hold on, talk.
Yeah, I just got a quick question.
Go ahead, good brother.
How you doing, Tarik?
Go ahead.
I was on YouTube one day, and I came across a person. Her name is Karen. Her name is Karen Hughes. She says.
Oh, Karen.
She says she's an ex IMF.
International Monetary Fund. Let's say this for starters, so you'll know.
Okay.
The United Nations, International Monetary Fund, all are branches of the United States Corporation belonging to the Jesuits. So let's get that clear. Number one. With all due respect, Karen is dropping the beans because they screwed her.
She said something about Ferdinand Marcos.
Yeah, and they got control of the gold. No, they don't. They are not keepers. So, see, this is, well, I'm telling you at a time. Everybody's trying to get a piece of the action because the trade windows are being shut. Now, I have respect for Karen, you know, because most of them won't tell the truth. But she, with all due respect, like many others, have been shafted. And so they're letting out certain truths. Do you understand what I'm saying? Let's put it this way. It is no different than people after the Treaty of Versailles, when Germany couldn't maintain a standing army, and you had Khazarians in Germany who were Polish, German, and others claiming Jew as a religion, as an identity, which is a total fraud, and they were raping Germany, literally, and Hitler nationalized Germany. And what was the argument? What's your nationality? Oh, we're Jew. No problem. Go home to Jew land. Didn't exist, did it? They lied. He said, you can get balloons, frog feet, logs, raft. As a matter of fact, we got some ships out there. Go home to your mother, because we're going to heal our mother. You're going to get off her breast. In politics, that's called nationalization. Hitler is not exactly the demon that they call him. And that whole paradigm has been misrepresented. And a lot of people are mad because he didn't finish the job. Well, some of the wrong people died, let's put it that way. And them same people are destroying the rest of the nations of the world right now. It's just that people don't want to admit it because they're caught into that paradigm, that fiction. And they've been supporting that fiction that was fictionalized before Hitler even showed up. That whole paradigm of that death was propagated before Hitler even showed up. Now, the deal of it is, all methods that are used to steal the estates of humanity in order to save the civilization on the planet must be cleared. That means that every man, every woman, and every child must confess their own and worship under their own vine and fig tree. In law, that's called nationalization. So now they want to talk about, just pull up the signature page. So they want to talk about Americans. They want to talk about that wall. Mexicans are Americans. Who's these Europeans standing down there talking about Mexicans can't come to another part of their own land? Who's these foreigners talking about people from Jamaica can't come to another part of their own land? Who's these foreigners talking about people from Puerto Rican can't come to their own land? We've allowed them to get away with that with our ignorance. Are we clear? So therefore, now they're making the argument because their economy is collapsing. However, they're not Americans. Still not Americans. And they disregarded the treaty. Therefore, they bridged their right to operate here on the land. This is the paradox they're dealing with, like it or not. However, it is also the paradox with people who really need to understand the politics that we're dealing with. And what we must do is change our language and not allow them to continue to get away with claiming to be Americans when they're not, blocking true Americans from traveling on the land, and then trying to claim sovereignty that don't damn belong to them. Now that's just the damn truth. Now, in principle of legitimate government, in principle, Donald Trump is correct. In principle. However, he's not American. However, in principle of what that office represents under the Republic, he's correct. But the motives are economic, not really moral. Are we clear? Yes. Now, the demons, or the Ku Klux Klan, which is the Democratic Party, that is the Ku Klux Klan, right? Right. Their pretext of loving Americans and being concerned for the Americans is not moral, it's political, because they need slave labor for the southern states to operate. Are we clear? Yes. Including the fact their child trafficking has come from the southern gateways. And a lot of their organs, where they're stealing organs of babies and young children, is done along that borderline. That's the real reason they don't want that border wall that Trump's talking about. It ain't got nothing to do with caring about Americans. Are we clear? The other deal, while they're having rebellion in Khalifa's land right now, is because they literally, the governor of California literally charge the different corporate entities that if they observe the federal law, that they're actually going to prosecute them. So that's really, Khalifa operations is really in a state of rebellion right now. That's literally open civil war. Literally. So meanwhile, the rest of the civilized world ain't buying their T-bombs, you know, and this is back to the point, the other points. So the different methods that people are using to claim their estates is not being recognized because these people are colored in the first place. However, from your position, you must have a standing claim as this stuff collapses, because ultimately, whether they like it or not, the rest of the world is going to dump their bonds anyway. And while we're talking, Russia has submarines in the harbor, in the Gulf of Mexico, and in the harbor here, and right off California, ready to go to war, just in case you didn't know that. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? And it was not Iran that bombed them ships. It was the CIA, right here from Langley, Virginia. You understand? Trying to start a war to divert. Are we clear? Now, they're going to be doing all of this nasty stuff, which they've always been doing. Meanwhile, they're coming more and more in the open, and they're losing credibility to the world. The real problem is these people here that keep on thinking that they're going to get some Negroite job type thing, and still holding on to the system and playing the black codes. They must be removed out the way too, because they're part of the problem. Meanwhile, some of your P2 Masons of the Vatican are operating for the return of the estates, and even Pope Francis's position is because they don't have a choice. Are we clear? Not because they're moral at all. Let's get that out of the way too.
I'm at the break it, y'all, because we really running over. Look at this brother's last question right here. We got to get out of here though. After you send the paperwork.
I can discontinue to your response off camera, but I just really wanted to go into the sovereign statement, because right now I have a brother who resides in Baltimore City. He just recently went through a rent case, and when he wrote, that particular magi in that language, I'm gonna show you the response